My name is Julia Hayes, 32 years old, and I never imagined my $650,000 relocation bonus would end up funding my sister-in-law, Madison's beach house. When my mother-in-law Eleanor called laughing about how she had diverted my money, she thought I was powerless to stop her. What she never expected was that my calm reply would set in motion a corporate investigation that would wipe the smug smile right off her face. If you are watching this now and have ever dealt with toxic in-laws, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from, while I tell you how justice was finally served. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. My parents taught me the value of hard work and integrity from an early age. Our home was small but filled with love and support. We never had much in terms of material possessions, but my parents made sure I had opportunities they never did, especially when it came to education. My passion for computer engineering emerged in high school when I took my first coding class. Something about the logical problem-solving and creative potential clicked with me immediately. I worked part-time jobs to save for college, and was thrilled when I earned a partial scholarship to the University of Washington. Even with the scholarship, I took out student loans and worked throughout college to make ends meet. Those years taught me resilience and the satisfaction of earning everything through my own efforts. After graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized tech company. The salary was modest, but I was eager to prove myself. During my first year, I met Daniel Wilson, a marketing executive who had joined the company around the same time. Our relationship developed naturally as we bonded over being newcomers navigating corporate culture. Daniel was kind, supportive, and seemed genuinely proud of my accomplishments. After 2 years of dating, we got married in a small ceremony with close friends and family. That was my first encounter with Eleanor Wilson, my mother-in-law. She arrived at our engagement party wearing an outfit that cost more than my monthly rent, and immediately began critiquing everything from the venue to my ring. I noticed how she dominated conversations, constantly referencing their family wealth and connections. Daniel had warned me that his mother could be difficult, but experiencing her behavior firsthand was jarring. Eleanor came from old money and had never worked a day in her life. She had married into even more wealth when she wed Richard Wilson, who owned a successful chain of luxury car dealerships. Their daughter Madison was clearly the favorite child, while Daniel seemed to exist in her shadow despite his own accomplishments. The class difference between our families became apparent at every interaction. Eleanor would make subtle comments about my background, my clothes, even my career choice. She once asked me if I was planning to quit my job after marriage, because surely Daniel could support me, as if my career was just a hobby. I politely but firmly explained that I loved my work and had no intention of giving it up. This seemed to offend her, as if my independence was a direct challenge to her values. Madison, my sister-in-law, was cut from the same cloth as her mother. She had bounced between expensive colleges without completing a degree, and now lived off a trust fund while claiming to be an influencer and lifestyle consultant. Her Instagram was filled with luxury vacations and designer products, all funded by her parents. Despite being 30 years old, she had never supported herself financially. Daniel's relationship with his family was complicated. He clearly loved them, but had distanced himself from their materialistic values. He had insisted on building his career without his father's connections, and had chosen a modest lifestyle despite having access to family money. This was one of the things I admired most about him, but it created tension with his parents, especially Eleanor, who saw his choices as a rejection of their way of life. The first 2 years of our marriage were relatively peaceful. We lived in Seattle, far enough from Boston, where the Wilsons resided that we only saw them on major holidays. Daniel was protective of me during these visits, quickly redirecting conversations when Eleanor started making inappropriate comments. We were building our careers and our life together, and despite the occasional family drama, we were happy. Everything changed when I was approached by Grace Technologies, one of the leading software companies in the country. They were impressed with the machine learning algorithm I had developed and offered me a senior position with their advanced research team. The job was a dream opportunity, with one major catch: it required relocating to their headquarters in Austin, Texas. Daniel and I spent weeks discussing the opportunity. It would mean uprooting our lives, finding him a new position, and moving far from our friends and support network. But the role offered creative freedom, resources for research, and a substantial salary increase. After careful consideration, Daniel encouraged me to accept the offer, saying we could make it work. What sealed the deal was Grace Technologies offering an exceptional relocation package: $650,000 to cover all moving expenses, housing costs, in Austin's expensive market, and compensation for Daniel's career transition. This was an unprecedented amount, reflecting how much the company valued my potential contribution. When I called my parents with the news, they were overjoyed and proud, already planning their first visit to Austin. Unfortunately, news of my professional success and the generous relocation package somehow made its way to Eleanor. The storm clouds were gathering, though I had no idea just how destructive they would become. The trouble began immediately after I signed the contract with Grace Technologies. Daniel and I were busily planning our move to Austin, researching neighborhoods and schools for our future, when Eleanor insisted we visit Boston to share our news in person. Daniel thought it was a peace offering, a chance for his mother to show support for our decision. I was skeptical, but agreed to the weekend trip. From the moment we arrived at their sprawling mansion in Beacon Hill, the atmosphere was tense. Eleanor had organized a dinner party, inviting family friends without warning us. Throughout the evening, she introduced me as her daughter-in-law, who works with computers, deliberately downplaying my new position. Meanwhile, she spoke at length about Madison's latest venture, a skincare line she was supposedly developing, though it seemed to exist only on social media. During dinner, Eleanor asked about our relocation plans in front of everyone. When Daniel mentioned the generous package from Grace Technologies, I saw something flash in Eleanor's eyes. Was it jealousy? Calculation? Whatever it was, made me uncomfortable. She pressed for details about the amount and how it would be distributed. Daniel, always proud of my accomplishments, shared more than I would have liked, explaining that the funds would be deposited in our joint account the following week before our move. The night ended with Eleanor making a toast that felt more like a backhanded compliment. She raised her glass and said, "Julia is so fortunate that companies these days feel the need to promote diversity hires with generous packages. We all know women in technology are so rare." I sat there stunned as the table fell awkwardly silent. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table and quickly changed the subject. Later that night in our guest room, I expressed my concerns to Daniel. Something about his mother's interest in our finances felt predatory. He assured me I was overreacting, that Eleanor was just trying to show interest in our lives in her own clumsy way. I wanted to believe him, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. The next morning, I overheard Eleanor and Madison in the garden, their voices carrying through the open window. "Do you know how much money they are getting just to move?" Eleanor said. $650,000 for a glorified IT job. Meanwhile, you cannot even afford the down payment on that beach house you want in Cape Cod. "It is so unfair," Madison replied. "Daniel married beneath him, and gets rewarded, while I do everything right, and get nothing." Their words stung, but I walked away before I could hear more. I didn't tell Daniel about the conversation, not wanting to create more tension before we left. In retrospect, that was my first mistake. The week after our return to Seattle was a whirlwind of preparations. Grace Technologies confirmed the relocation funds would be deposited on Monday, giving us 2 weeks to finalize our move. I was immersed in wrapping up projects at my current job, while Daniel was interviewing for positions in Austin. We were excited and focused on our future. The money arrived as promised, appearing in our joint account Monday morning. I remember feeling a wave of relief, seeing the balance, knowing we could make a fresh start without financial stress. I called Daniel to confirm the deposit, and we agreed to begin making arrangements for the move that evening. But when I logged into our account after work, my blood ran cold. The entire sum, all $650,000, had been transferred out earlier that day, to an unknown account. I immediately called Daniel, who was as shocked as I was. He hadn't made any transfers. We contacted the bank in a panic, only to learn that the transfer had been authorized using Daniel's credentials from a device recognized by our account. As we were still processing this information, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. I put it on speaker so Daniel could hear. "Julia, darling," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I just wanted to thank you for your generosity. Madison has made an offer on that beach house she has been eyeing, and your relocation money made it possible." "What are you talking about?" I stammered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Eleanor's tone changed, dropping the pretense. "Oh, please. That money was wasted on you anyway. You do not deserve it. Madison has been dreaming of that property for years. Consider it the family helping the family. Daniel would agree if he wasn't so blinded by whatever spell you have cast on him." Daniel grabbed the phone. "Mother, what have you done?" he demanded, his face pale with shock. "Now, don't be dramatic, dear. I simply used the banking information you stored on your old laptop the last time you visited. You really should be more careful with your passwords. The money will benefit the family this way. That beach house will be a legacy for generations of Wilsons, not squandered on an unnecessary move for her career whim." She laughed, then a cold sound that sent chills down my spine. "You cannot do anything about it anyway. The money is already in the seller's escrow account. The deal closes tomorrow." As the reality of what she had done sank in, I felt physically ill. Our future had been stolen in an instant by someone who was supposed to be family. The relocation money wasn't just for housing, it was meant to support us while Daniel found new employment to cover the costs of our move across the country, to compensate for the higher cost of living in Austin. Without it, my dream job could slip away before it even began. My hands were shaking as I took the phone back. "Thanks for letting me know," I said quietly, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. Eleanor seemed taken aback by my response. "Well, I am glad you are being reasonable about this. Perhaps you are smarter than I gave you credit for." I ended the call without another word, then turned to Daniel, who looked devastated and enraged simultaneously. "I need to call Grace Technologies," I told him, "and then I am calling the police." The hours following Eleanor's shocking call were a blur of frantic phone calls and mounting anxiety. Daniel paced our apartment, alternating between apologizing profusely and making enraged calls to his father, who claimed complete ignorance of Eleanor's actions. Whether Richard was truly unaware or simply covering for his wife remained unclear, but his stammered response suggested at least some level of surprise. My first call was to Amelia Parker, my contact at Grace Technologies. I struggled to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation, emphasizing that the funds had been stolen through unauthorized access to our account. To my immense relief, Amelia was understanding, even sympathetic, but her concern was evident. "Julia, this is incredibly serious," she said. "I need to report this to our finance department and legal team immediately. This money was allocated specifically for your relocation expenses. The company will need to investigate." The word investigate hung in the air, simultaneously offering hope and intensifying my anxiety. I assured her we had already contacted the bank and would be filing a police report. She promised to call back after speaking with the appropriate departments. Next came the call to the police, which proved frustratingly anticlimactic. Since Eleanor had used Daniel's credentials and the money had gone to a family member, they categorized it as a civil matter rather than criminal theft. The officer suggested we consult an attorney, his tone implying this was just another family squabble over money. He couldn't see what was truly at stake: my career opportunity, our future, and the fundamental breach of trust. That night, sleep was impossible. Daniel and I sat at our kitchen table until dawn trying to formulate a plan. The weight of his guilt was palpable. He kept repeating that he should have been more careful with his passwords, that he should have recognized his mother's interest in our finances as predatory. I didn't blame him. His own mother had betrayed him as much as she had me. but our situation remained dire regardless. "We haven't lost everything," Daniel said around 3 in the morning, his voice hoarse. "We still have our savings. We could use that for the move, find a smaller place in Austin temporarily." But our savings wouldn't come close to covering what we needed, and we both knew it. Austin's housing market was expensive, and we'd need a significant portion just for deposits and first month's rent. Then there were the moving expenses, potential gaps in Daniel's employment, and all the unforeseen costs that come with relocating across the country. The next day brought new challenges. I called in sick to work, unable to face colleagues while my professional future hung in the balance. Daniel did the same, and we met with a lawyer who specialized in financial crimes. She listened carefully to our story, her expression growing increasingly grave. "So your mother-in-law accessed your account without permission, transferred a company-provided relocation bonus to purchase property for your sister-in-law, and openly admitted to doing so," the lawyer Sophia Grant clarified. When we confirmed this, she leaned forward. "That's not just a family dispute. That's wire fraud, identity theft, and possibly corporate fund misappropriation, which could implicate you both if Grace Technologies decides you were complicit." Her words sent a chill through me. I hadn't considered that the company might suspect us of collaborating with Eleanor. The lawyer advised us to document everything, gather any evidence of Eleanor's admission, and prepare for potential legal action, both to recover the funds and to protect ourselves from suspicion. As we left the lawyer's office, Amelia called with an update that made my stomach drop. Grace Technologies' financial compliance team was indeed launching a formal investigation. They would be sending investigators not only to speak with us, but also to interview Eleanor directly. The company needed to determine if this was truly theft or an elaborate scheme to misuse corporate funds. "I never wanted this to become so formal," I told Daniel as we drove home. "I just wanted the money back so we could move forward with our plans." His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My mother brought this on herself. Maybe it's time she faced real consequences for once in her life. Over the next few days, the stress began to take a physical toll. I developed insomnia and lost my appetite. Daniel wasn't faring much better, alternating between dejected silence and bursts of anger directed at his family. He tried calling Madison, hoping to appeal to whatever conscience she might possess, but she refused to speak with him. The most painful aspect was watching our carefully laid plans crumble. We had already given notice at our jobs and apartment. Friends had organized a going-away party. My parents had booked flights to help us settle in Austin. Now everything was on hold, our future suspended in uncertainty. I found myself sitting in our half-packed apartment, surrounded by boxes labeled for a move that might not happen, fighting back tears of frustration. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. Years of hard work of proving myself in a male-dominated field had led to this opportunity. And in one calculated move, Eleanor had jeopardized everything because she couldn't stand to see her son's wife succeed. A week after Eleanor's call, I received an email that rekindled a flicker of hope. Grace Technologies' investigation team wanted to meet with us the following day. They were sending 2 corporate investigators to our apartment to take detailed statements before proceeding to Boston to confront Eleanor. "Maybe this is it," Daniel said, allowing himself to sound optimistic for the first time since the theft. "If the company is taking it this seriously, maybe they can pressure her in ways we can't." I wanted to believe him but feared getting my hopes up. Eleanor had spent a lifetime evading consequences through privilege and manipulation. Would this really be any different? That night Eleanor called again. Daniel put her on speaker without telling her I could hear. "Darling," she began, her voice artificially light. "I hope you've calmed down about the money situation. Your father and I have been talking and we think this is all for the best. Madison's beach house will be a family asset. You and Julia can use it sometimes if you ask nicely." Daniel's response was ice cold. "Did you know Grace Technologies is sending investigators to talk to you, Mother? They're treating this as corporate fund misappropriation. Do you understand what that means?" There was a moment of silence before Eleanor laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous. This is a family matter. No company would involve themselves in a private financial decision. It wasn't a private decision, Daniel shot back. You stole money that was specifically allocated for Julia's job relocation. The company has every right to investigate where their funds went. Well, she huffed. I'll simply explain that you both changed your minds and decided to gift the money to Madison. It's your word against mine. Except for the fact that you literally called to brag about stealing it, I chimed in, unable to remain silent any longer. And I recorded that call. This was a bluff. We hadn't actually recorded anything, but Eleanor had no way of knowing that. Her sharp intake of breath suggested the possibility had never occurred to her. You wouldn't, she whispered. Try me, I replied, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. The call ended abruptly. Daniel and I exchanged glances, a tiny spark of triumph in our otherwise bleak situation. For the first time, Eleanor seemed rattled. It wasn't much, but it was something. The corporate investigators from Grace Technologies arrived precisely at 9 the next morning. Keith Morris and Angela Ramirez introduced themselves with the polite but serious demeanor of people accustomed to uncovering uncomfortable truths. They set up recording equipment in our living room and asked us to walk them through the entire situation from beginning to end. For nearly 3 hours we provided every detail we could remember. I shared the exact timeline of events from accepting the job offer to discovering the missing funds. Daniel explained his mother's history of controlling behavior and her obvious disdain for my career. We showed them bank statements documenting the transfer emails from the bank, confirming we had reported unauthorized access, and our correspondence with the police. Angela asked pointed questions about our financial situation before and after my job offer. Had we been having money problems? Did we have gambling debts or addiction issues? Was there any reason we might have willingly transferred the relocation funds? I understood they needed to eliminate all possibilities, but the implication that we might be lying still stung. Keith was particularly interested in Eleanor's admission. You say she called specifically to tell you she had taken the money, he clarified, looking up from his notes. Yes, Daniel confirmed. She wanted to gloat about it. She explicitly said the money was being used for my sister's beach house, and that Julia didn't deserve it anyway. Do you have any record of this call? Text messages, voicemails, anything documenting her admission? Keith pressed. We exchanged glances before I admitted. We don't have a recording of the first call when she confessed, but we do have text messages she sent afterward. I pulled up my phone and showed them a text from Eleanor that read, "The beach house closing went smoothly. Madison is ecstatic. You two will thank me someday for keeping the money in the family where it belongs." Angela photographed the message and made notes. Did you respond to this? I did, I said, scrolling to show my reply. What you did is theft. This isn't over. Eleanor's response had been typically dismissive. Don't be dramatic. No one will believe you anyway. Angela and Keith exchanged glances. This is helpful, Angela said carefully, but we'll need more to build a solid case. Mr. Wilson, you mentioned your mother accessed your banking information from an old laptop. Daniel nodded. I left my personal laptop at their house during our last visit before all this happened. I had logged into our joint account to pay some bills while we were there. I thought I had logged out, but clearly I hadn't, or she found a way to access the saved information. Keith made a note. Do you have any idea if your mother has technical expertise that would allow her to access secured information? Daniel shook his head. She can barely use her iPhone without calling Madison for help. But my father has an IT team for his business. She could have asked one of them to help her. Or she simply found your login information still stored on the laptop, Angela suggested. Either way, accessing your account without permission constitutes unauthorized access under federal law. As the interview concluded, Keith explained their next steps. We'll be flying to Boston tomorrow to interview your mother-in-law. Based on what we've gathered here, there's substantial evidence of fund misappropriation. Grace Technologies takes this extremely seriously, both because of the amount involved and because it directly impacts an employee's ability to fulfill their contractual obligations. What happens if you determine she did steal the money? I asked, trying to keep the desperate hope out of my voice. In cases like this, the company typically pursues full restitution, Keith explained. That would mean the return of all misappropriated funds. Additionally, there may be legal consequences depending on how your mother-in-law responds to our investigation. After they left, Daniel and I allowed ourselves a moment of cautious optimism. The investigators seemed to believe us, and they were taking the case seriously. But Eleanor had spent a lifetime manipulating situations to her advantage. Would this time really be different? That evening, we received a flurry of texts from Madison. The first read, "Why are you doing this to Mom? She was just trying to help me." The next escalated, "You're both so selfish. I deserve that beach house after everything I've been through." And finally, Mom is freaking out about some corporate investigation. "This is going too far. Call it off, or you'll regret it." Daniel responded simply, "Return the money, and this ends immediately." Madison's reply came quickly. "The money is gone. The house closing finished yesterday. There's nothing to return." I felt a wave of despair. If the money had already been used to purchase the property, how could we possibly recover it in time for our move? Even if Grace Technologies determined theft had occurred, legal proceedings to force the sale of the house could take months or years. Daniel must have sensed my distress because he pulled me into a tight embrace. "This isn't over," he promised. "If my mother and sister think they've won, they don't know who they're dealing with." That night we received an unexpected call from Richard, Daniel's father. His normally confident voice sounded strained. "Daniel," he began hesitantly, "your mother told me about some misunderstanding regarding Julia's relocation funds. I'm sure we can sort this out as a family." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "A misunderstanding? She committed identity theft and wire fraud, Dad. She stole $650,000 that was meant for our future. That's not a misunderstanding." There was a long pause before Richard spoke again. "These investigators who are coming tomorrow, how serious is this?" "Very," Daniel replied. "Grace Technologies doesn't take the theft of corporate funds lightly. They could pursue criminal charges." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll talk to your mother," Richard finally said. "And Madison, this may have gone too far." After he hung up, Daniel turned to me, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "He's worried. Dad doesn't get worried unless there's a real threat to their precious reputation or lifestyle." For the first time in days, I allowed myself to imagine a positive outcome. If Richard was concerned enough to intervene, perhaps Eleanor would finally face consequences she couldn't charm or buy her way out of. The next morning, we received a call from Angela. "We're about to meet with Mrs. Wilson," she informed us. "I wanted to let you know that our financial forensics team has traced the full path of the funds. We have documentation showing the money went directly from your account to an escrow account for a property purchase in Cape Cod with Madison Wilson listed as the buyer." This confirmation of what we already knew was still validating. The company had concrete proof of where their money had gone, but what happened next would determine whether that proof could actually help us. "What are the chances we can recover the funds?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Angela's tone was carefully neutral. "That depends on how cooperative Mrs. Wilson is today. But I can tell you that Grace Technologies is prepared to pursue this aggressively, including potential legal action against all parties involved in misappropriating company funds." After we hung up, Daniel and I sat in tense silence, both staring at our phones waiting for news. The investigators would be meeting with Eleanor right now. I tried to imagine her reaction to being confronted by corporate investigators with evidence of her theft. Would she maintain her entitled attitude, or would the reality of potential consequences finally break through? Hours passed with no updates. I tried to distract myself by continuing our packing. We had decided to proceed, as if the move would happen, refusing to give up hope. Daniel called his father twice, but got no answer. Finally, just after 6 in the evening, my phone rang. It was Keith Morris. "Miss Hayes," he said, his professional tone giving away nothing. "We've completed our interview with Eleanor Wilson and have some information to share with you and Mr. Wilson. Are you both available to talk?" "Yes," I replied, my heart pounding as I put the phone on speaker. Daniel grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly as we prepared to hear either wonderful news or the final death of our hopes. Keith's voice came clearly through the speaker, measured but with an undercurrent of satisfaction that made my pulse quicken. Mrs. Wilson was initially quite resistant to our questioning. She maintained that the funds were a gift from you and Mr. Wilson to help your sister-in-law purchase a vacation property. Daniel made a disgusted sound, but Keith continued. However, when we presented evidence of the unauthorized account access and the text messages in which she essentially admitted to the theft, her demeanor changed significantly. When we explained that Grace Technologies was prepared to pursue criminal charges for wire fraud and misappropriation of corporate funds, Mrs. Wilson became considerably more cooperative. I held my breath, afraid to hope. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Angela chimed in, "that Mrs. Wilson has agreed to return the full amount of $650,000 to Grace Technologies within 24 hours. The company will then redistribute the funds to you as originally intended." The relief was so overwhelming that I couldn't speak. Daniel thanked them, his voice thick with emotion, and asked how this would be possible if the money had already been used to purchase the beach house. Keith explained. "According to Mrs. Wilson, the property purchase has not actually been completed. The funds were in escrow, but the final paperwork had not been processed. She claims she can retrieve the money by canceling the purchase agreement." I found my voice again. "And you believe her?" "We've verified this with the real estate company handling the transaction," Angela assured us. "Additionally, we've made it clear that if the funds are not returned by this time tomorrow, Grace Technologies will file formal charges and pursue maximum penalties. Given the potential consequences to both her freedom and the family's reputation, we believe Mrs. Wilson will comply." After we ended the call, Daniel and I sat in stunned silence for several moments before he pulled me into a fierce hug. "We just got our future back," he whispered against my hair. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. We tried to carry on with normal activities, packing, finalizing details for the move, but both of us checked our phones obsessively for updates. Would Eleanor actually follow through, or was this just another delay tactic? At exactly 5 o'clock the following afternoon, I received an email from Amelia at Grace Technologies. The subject line read, simply, "Funds recovered." The message confirmed that Eleanor had returned the full amount as promised, and the company would be depositing the relocation package into a new secure account they had established for us. She ended with congratulations and her excitement to welcome me to the Austin office as planned. I called Daniel, immediately reading him the email through happy tears. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I need to call my father," he finally said, his voice resolute. While Daniel had that difficult conversation in our bedroom, my phone rang again. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway, still riding the high of our victory. "Is this Julia Hayes?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Julia," I confirmed cautiously. "Miss Hayes, my name is Diana Lewis. I'm with the Boston Globe. We're running a story about Eleanor Wilson's attempted misappropriation of corporate funds from Grace Technologies. Would you care to comment?" I nearly dropped the phone in shock. "How did you hear about this?" "Miss Hayes, this is quite a significant story. Eleanor Wilson is a prominent figure in Boston society, and allegations of financial crimes involving such a substantial sum are newsworthy. We understand the company conducted an investigation and forced Mrs. Wilson to return funds she had diverted from your relocation package." The realization hit me like a wave. The investigation wasn't just resolving our personal situation, it was becoming public knowledge. Eleanor's worst fear, damage to her precious reputation, was coming true. I declined to comment, telling the reporter I needed to consult with Grace Technologies before making any public statements, then immediately called Amelia back. She confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Word of the investigation had leaked, likely from someone at the real estate company, when the beach house purchase was suddenly canceled. Grace Technologies had not intended to publicize the situation, but they wouldn't deny it either if asked directly. Corporate theft was taken seriously, and they had documentation of everything that had occurred. When Daniel emerged from the bedroom, his expression was grim but resolved. "My father is devastated," he said. "Not because Mother did something wrong, but because she got caught. He's worried about their social standing, about business connections, about what their friends will think." "And Madison?" I asked hesitantly. "Furious, of course. She's blaming us for ruining everything." Daniel rubbed his temples wearily. "I told Dad that we never wanted this to become public, but Mother's actions had consequences. I also made it clear that our relationship would need serious rebuilding if they want to be part of our lives going forward." As evening fell, my phone began buzzing with text notifications from unknown numbers. Somehow my contact information had been leaked, and journalists were reaching out for comments. Daniel was receiving similar messages. We decided to turn off our phones and take the evening to process everything that had happened. The next morning, we woke to find that several Boston news outlets had indeed run stories about Eleanor Wilson's financial misconduct. The articles were carefully worded to avoid outright accusations of criminal behavior, but they clearly outlined how she had diverted corporate funds meant for her son and daughter-in-law's relocation. For a woman whose entire identity was built around social status and the appearance of propriety, this public exposure was perhaps the harshest punishment possible. 2 days later, as we were finalizing our moving arrangements, I received a text from Eleanor herself, the first direct communication since her gloating call about taking our money. "I hope you're satisfied with the damage you've caused to this family," it read. "Our reputation is in tatters because you couldn't handle a simple family financial arrangement. Madison has lost her dream home and barely leaves her room. Richard is fielding calls from concerned business associates, all because you had to involve your company instead of keeping family matters private." I showed the message to Daniel, who shook his head in disbelief. Even now, she sees herself as the victim. She hasn't learned a thing. I drafted and redrafted my response several times before settling on "Eleanor, you stole $650,000 that was meant for our future. You accessed our account without permission and transferred funds that weren't yours to take. These were the natural consequences of your actions, not our desire for revenge. I hope someday you can understand the difference." She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. Some people are incapable of accepting responsibility for their actions, no matter how clear their culpability. The day before our scheduled move to Austin, we received a surprising visit from Richard. He looked older somehow. The confident bearing I remembered, replaced with a weary slump to his shoulders. Daniel invited him in cautiously, and we all sat in our living room surrounded by packed boxes. "I want to apologize." Richard began, looking directly at me for perhaps the first time since I'd known him. "What Eleanor did was wrong. I should have taken it more seriously from the beginning, instead of trying to dismiss it as a family disagreement." His apology seemed genuine, if belated. I nodded my acknowledgement, but let Daniel take the lead in responding. "Why did you come, Dad?" he asked gently. Richard sighed heavily. "I wanted to see you before you left, and to let you know that Eleanor and I are getting counseling. This situation has forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our family dynamics, especially regarding how we've treated you, Julia." He turned to me again. "I allowed Eleanor's prejudice against your background to influence my own perception. I failed to recognize your worth as an individual and as a positive influence on my son. I'm deeply sorry for that." The apology was unexpected and moved me more than I cared to admit. "Thank you, Richard," I said simply. "That means a lot." We talked for nearly an hour. Richard explained that the public exposure had indeed been difficult for Eleanor, but perhaps necessary. Several of their friends had distanced themselves, and she was experiencing social consequences for perhaps the first time in her life. Madison was struggling to accept that her beach house dreams had evaporated, but Richard had finally stopped enabling her financial dependence and was encouraging her to find meaningful work. As he prepared to leave, Richard handed Daniel an envelope. "It's not much, but I hope it helps with the move," he said. "Consider it a personal housewarming gift from me, completely separate from the company funds." Inside was a check for $20,000. It was a generous gift, though notably less than what Eleanor had attempted to steal. More significant than the amount was the gesture. It represented Richard's first step toward making amends and rebuilding a relationship with his son. After he left, Daniel and I reflected on the whirlwind of events that had led us to this point. The theft that had nearly derailed our future had ultimately forced important truths into the open. Eleanor's actions had been exposed, yes, but so had deeper issues within the Wilson family, dynamics issues that might never have been addressed otherwise. The next morning we boarded our flight to Austin with mixed emotions. Relief that the relocation funds had been recovered and our plans could proceed. Satisfaction that Eleanor had faced consequences for her actions. Hope that Richard's apology might represent the beginning of healthier family relationships, and excitement for the new chapter we were about to begin together. As the plane took off, Daniel squeezed my hand. "Eleanor thought she was punishing you for daring to succeed on your own terms," he said quietly. "Instead, she gave you the perfect opportunity to prove just how formidable you really are." I smiled, watching Seattle recede beneath us. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, establishing myself in a new position, building a life in an unfamiliar city, navigating the complicated aftermath with Daniel's family. But we had faced a significant challenge together and emerged stronger for it. Whatever came next, I was ready. Our arrival in Austin marked the beginning of a fresh chapter. The relocation funds, now securely in our new account, allowed us to rent a lovely home in a neighborhood close to the Grace Technologies campus. After the turmoil of recent weeks, there was something deeply satisfying about unpacking our belongings in a space that represented all we had fought for. My first day at Grace Technologies exceeded all expectations. Amelia gave me a personal tour of the state-of-the-art research facilities, introducing me to team members who had been eagerly awaiting my arrival. The advanced machine learning project I would be leading was even more innovative than I had initially understood, with potential applications in healthcare that could genuinely improve lives. What surprised me most was how many people at the company knew about the situation with Eleanor. Not the specific details, but enough to understand that my relocation had faced unusual challenges. Senior executives went out of their way to welcome me, assuring me that the company valued my contributions and was committed to supporting my transition. It was a stark contrast to the dismissive treatment I had often experienced in previous roles. During my second week, I was invited to lunch with Heather Jackson, the Chief Technology Officer. As we discussed my preliminary ideas for the project, she unexpectedly brought up the investigation. "I hope you don't mind me mentioning this," she said carefully, "but I wanted you to know that your handling of the situation with your relocation funds impressed a lot of people here. You were professional and patient during an incredibly stressful time. Those are qualities we value as much as technical expertise." I was momentarily speechless, having expected the company to want to forget the awkward incident. "Thank you," I finally managed. "It was certainly not how I planned to make my first impression." Heather smiled. "First impressions are overrated. How we handle challenges reveals far more about character." She paused, stirring her iced tea. "I'll be frank, Julia. We have our eye on you for leadership beyond this initial project. Your technical skills got you hired, but your grace under pressure suggests you might be suited for more senior roles in the future." This conversation was the first indication that the painful ordeal with Eleanor might actually have unexpected professional benefits. Rather than harming my standing at Grace Technologies, it had showcased qualities that technical interviews rarely reveal. Meanwhile, Daniel was building his own new beginning. After several interviews, he secured a position with a marketing firm that specialized in tech clients. The role offered more responsibility than his previous job, with potential for growth in an industry he was passionate about. Watching him thrive independently, without family connections or inherited advantage, filled me with pride. Our new home gradually transformed from a house filled with boxes to a warm, welcoming space that reflected our shared tastes. We explored Austin together on weekends, discovering favorite restaurants, parks, and local attractions. The distance from Boston and the Wilson family drama allowed us to reconnect as a couple, reminding us why we had chosen each other in the first place. 3 months after our move, my parents came to visit. Showing them around my new workplace, seeing their pride as colleagues praised my early contributions to the project, was deeply satisfying. My father, who had worked so hard to give me educational opportunities he never had, became emotional during a demonstration of the algorithm I was developing. "This is why we sacrificed," he told me privately later. "Not for recognition or status, but so you could do meaningful work that makes you happy." He squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Julia." Hearing those words, I couldn't help but contrast my parents' unconditional support with Eleanor's attempts to undermine me at every turn. One perspective had nurtured growth and confidence. The other had sought to diminish and control. The difference couldn't have been clearer. Communication with the Wilsons remained complicated. Richard called Daniel regularly, making genuine efforts to maintain their relationship. He asked thoughtful questions about our new life in Austin and Daniel's job, showing interest without judgment. He mentioned that he and Eleanor were continuing counseling, working through long-established patterns in their marriage and parenting. Eleanor herself remained largely silent. The few times she spoke to Daniel on the phone, she was polite but distant, never directly acknowledging what had happened. Madison occasionally sent passive-aggressive texts, implying that our move had somehow been selfish despite the circumstances. We maintained civil but careful boundaries with both of them. 6 months after our relocation, the machine learning project I was leading achieved a significant breakthrough. Our algorithm demonstrated unprecedented accuracy in early disease detection, potentially allowing for intervention months earlier than current methods. Grace Technologies organized a presentation for stakeholders and medical partners, and I was asked to lead it. Standing before a room of industry leaders and healthcare professionals, explaining the technology that could save countless lives, I experienced a profound sense of purpose. This was why I had fought so hard to protect this opportunity. Not for the title or the salary, but for the chance to create something meaningful. After the presentation, which was met with enthusiastic response, Amelia pulled me aside. "We have something to discuss," she said with a smile. "The company wants to fast-track your advancement. There's a director position opening in the AI research division, and your name is at the top of the list." The promotion would represent a significant jump in both responsibility and compensation, coming much sooner than I had expected. I was momentarily overwhelmed, thinking of the journey that had led to this point. Just months ago, I had been fighting to recover stolen funds and salvage my career opportunity. Now I was being considered for leadership in one of the most innovative divisions of a cutting-edge company. That evening, I shared the news with Daniel over dinner at our favorite local restaurant. His face lit up with genuine joy and pride. "You absolutely deserve this, Julia. After everything you've overcome, this recognition feels like cosmic justice." We toasted with champagne, celebrating not just the potential promotion, but everything it represented. My professional success was tangible proof that Eleanor's attempts to derail my career had failed spectacularly. The universe had a certain poetic symmetry sometimes. The following weekend, Daniel received an unexpected call from his father. Richard was coming to Austin on business and wanted to have dinner with us. When Daniel shared this news, I felt a moment of apprehension. Our new life felt sacred, somehow protected by distance from the Wilson family drama. But Richard had made genuine efforts to make amends, and rejecting his overture seemed unnecessarily punitive. We agreed to meet him at a restaurant downtown. When Richard arrived, I was struck by how different he seemed from the intimidating figure I remembered. He greeted me with a warm hug, something he had never done before, and throughout dinner showed sincere interest in both my work and Daniel's. Near the end of the evening, he brought up Eleanor. "She's still struggling," he admitted. The public embarrassment hit her harder than I initially understood. But she's beginning to recognize how her behavior has affected her relationships, especially with you, Daniel. He turned to me. And with you, Julia. She's not ready to reach out directly yet, but she's asked me to express her regret. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Eleanor, even acknowledged regret represented significant progress. Daniel and I exchanged glances silently, agreeing to accept this small olive branch for what it was, a beginning, not a resolution. As Richard prepared to leave, he hesitated, then said, I want you both to know that I've made some changes to our estate planning. Madison will still be provided for, but I've ensured that Daniel will receive an equal share. More importantly, I've established a separate educational trust for any children you might have in the future. He looked directly at me. I want to make sure that my grandchildren never doubt their grandfather's support for their dreams, whatever those might be. It was a meaningful gesture addressing the imbalance that had characterized the Wilson family dynamics for so long. More than the financial aspect, it represented Richard's commitment to creating a more equitable family legacy. After he left, Daniel and I walked along the Austin riverfront, reflecting on how much had changed in just 6 months. The theft that had nearly derailed our future had instead become a catalyst for positive transformation in nearly every aspect of our lives. My career was flourishing. Our relationship had strengthened through shared adversity. Even the damaged family relationships were slowly beginning to heal. That night, as we sat on our back porch, watching the stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. Eleanor's attempt to control our lives through financial manipulation had ultimately given us the freedom to create something better than we had imagined. The $650,000 she had tried to steal had been recovered, but the experience had given us something far more valuable: perspective, resilience, and appreciation for what truly mattered. 1 year after our life-changing move to Austin, Daniel and I decided to host a housewarming party in our new home, a beautiful property we had purchased in a quiet neighborhood with mature oak trees and a view of the hills. The down payment had come partially from my bonus after the successful launch of our medical AI platform, which was now being implemented in hospitals across the country. As I arranged flowers in the kitchen, I marveled at how different my life had become since that shocking phone call from Eleanor. I had accepted the director position at Grace Technologies and was now leading a team of brilliant engineers and data scientists. Daniel had been promoted to creative director at his firm, earning recognition for an innovative campaign that had gone viral. We had built a community of friends who knew and appreciated us for who we truly were, not for family connections or social status. Our guests that evening included colleagues, neighbors, and friends we had made since moving to Austin. My parents flew in for the occasion, as did Daniel's father, Richard, who had visited several times over the past year and gradually become a positive presence in our lives. Notably absent were Eleanor and Madison, though Richard assured us that both were making progress in their own ways. Eleanor has started volunteering at a women's business mentorship program, he told us privately during the party. I think helping young women navigate professional challenges has given her some perspective on her own behavior. She still has a long way to go, but it's a start. As for Madison, Richard had finally stopped enabling her financially, instead helping her find an entry-level position at a friend's company. She was, according to Richard, initially resentful, but gradually finding satisfaction in earning her own way. The beach house dream had been replaced with more realistic goals, including returning to school to complete her long-abandoned degree. After our guests departed, Daniel and I sat on our back patio, enjoying the peaceful evening. Looking at the home we had built together, I reflected on the unexpected lessons from our ordeal with Eleanor. You know what? I realized, I said to Daniel, who was contentedly sipping his nightcap. What Eleanor did was terrible, but in some ways, it was the best thing that could have happened to us. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. How so? It forced us to confront the unhealthy dynamics that had been simmering beneath the surface for years, I explained. If she hadn't done something so extreme, we might have continued tolerating the small indignities the subtle undermining, the constant judgment. We might never have established proper boundaries. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. And professionally, it actually elevated your standing at Grace Technologies. They saw how you handled a crisis with integrity and patience. It's strange how life works sometimes, I mused. The money was important. It represented our future, our dreams. But the experience of fighting for what was rightfully ours taught us something: money can't buy the confidence to stand our ground, and the wisdom to recognize what truly matters. The $650,000 relocation package had been the catalyst for profound change, but the true value of our journey couldn't be measured in dollars. It was evident in the strength of our relationship, in our professional accomplishments, in the healthier family dynamics, slowly taking root, and in our growing confidence to create lives authentic to our own values rather than others' expectations. 2 years after the incident, I received an email that left me momentarily speechless. Eleanor had written to me directly for the first time since her theft attempt. The message was brief but significant. Julia, I've been working with my therapist to understand the harm I've caused, particularly to you. My behavior was inexcusable. The sense of entitlement I felt over money that was meant for your professional advancement reflected deep-seated issues I'm still addressing. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the wrong I did. Congratulations on your continued success at Grace Technologies. Eleanor. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it represented remarkable progress from a woman who had once been incapable of acknowledging any wrongdoing. I showed the message to Daniel, who read it with widened eyes. "Never thought I'd see the day," he murmured. "Do you think you'll respond?" I considered the question carefully. Yes, I decided. Not to absolve her, but to acknowledge the effort it must have taken to reach out. My reply was simple. "Eleanor, thank you for your email. I appreciate your acknowledgement of what happened and your efforts toward growth. While the past cannot be undone, I believe in the possibility of a healthier future relationship built on mutual respect. Julia." Our communication remained limited after that exchange, but the toxic animosity that had characterized our relationship began to dissolve. When we occasionally visited Boston, we would meet Eleanor for brief civil interactions. She made efforts to ask appropriate questions about my work, no longer dismissing my career as a hobby or diversity hire. These small steps toward respect, while imperfect, represented significant progress. The story of Eleanor's attempted theft eventually became something we could discuss openly, even with a touch of dark humor. At a dinner with close friends in Austin, someone asked how we had decided to make the cross-country move. "Well," Daniel began with a wry smile, "it's quite a story. My mother decided my wife's relocation bonus would make a lovely beach house for my sister." As he recounted the tale, I watched our friends' expressions shift from shock to disbelief, to admiration for how we had handled the situation. Sharing the story no longer felt painful. Instead, it highlighted how far we had come and the strength we had discovered within ourselves. Perhaps the most profound change was in how I viewed my own worth, both professionally and personally. Eleanor's dismissive attitude had temporarily shaken my confidence, making me question whether I truly deserved the opportunities I had earned. Fighting to reclaim what was rightfully mine had permanently banished those doubts. I knew with absolute certainty that my achievements were the result of my own abilities, perseverance, and hard work. 3 years after our move to Austin, I was invited to give a keynote address at a Women in Technology conference. Standing before hundreds of female engineers, data scientists, and tech executives, I shared not only my professional journey, but also the personal challenges I had overcome, including the theft of my relocation funds. The story resonated deeply, particularly with women who had faced their own battles for recognition and respect in male-dominated fields or within their own families. Afterward, a young engineer approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said earnestly. "My father-in-law constantly undermines my career, telling my husband I'm wasting my education. Hearing how you stood your ground gives me courage to do the same. Moments like these reinforce that our personal struggles, when shared, can become sources of strength for others. Eleanor's attempt to diminish me had instead created a platform from which I could help lift other women facing similar challenges. As I reflect on our journey now, I'm struck by how an act intended to harm us ultimately became a catalyst for profound growth and positive change. The $650,000 that Eleanor attempted to steal was recovered. Yes, but the experience gave us something far more valuable: perspective on what truly matters in life. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or properties, but in having the courage to stand up for yourself, the wisdom to set healthy boundaries, and the confidence to create a life aligned with your own values rather than others' expectations. Eleanor's theft attempt was painful, but it forced us to confront issues that might otherwise have festered indefinitely. In fighting for what was rightfully ours, we discovered strengths we never knew we possessed. If you're watching this and facing your own battles with toxic family members or workplace undermining, remember that standing your ground isn't just about the immediate issue at stake. It's about claiming your right to be respected and valued. Sometimes the most painful challenges become the most powerful catalysts for positive transformation. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to undermine your success? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you found value in my story. And remember, sometimes the people who try to diminish your light are simply afraid of how brightly you shine. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand firm in your own worth, whatever challenges you face.